All right, this is No More Bits. I am your host, Matt Walker, 1/3 of Walrus, who is, in its entirety, the host of Little Bits and Pieces, the companion, or this is the companion podcast for that show, where I go through in more depth about the improv topics that we use as fodder for the episodes. Now, this episode is about Game of the Scene. This is a companion to episode 3 of Little Bits and Pieces. Game of the Scene. All right, if you've been doing improv for no time at all, you have heard of this term, Game of the Scene. In some iteration or another, some people call it the comedic concepts. Other people call it the turn, the twist, the point. Game of the Scene is probably the most ubiquitous way to say what it is. And it is mysterious. This is one of the hardest concepts in improv to get across because it toes the line of being not just a thing, but rather something that is inherently built into people. Game of the Scene, what is it? It's the pattern in a scene that is repeated and heightened until the end of the scene. That is the most generic explanation I can find, other than it's the funny thing. It is one of the hardest things to teach people because, again, there seems to be a block. If you don't inherently get it, it is going to be way harder to get through it, learning what it is and everything. This is what I always do, okay? I always approach this in its simplest form, right? Heightening a pattern. That is what we want to do with the Game of the Scene. I do an exercise called show and tell, okay? I have 3 people sit in chairs, stand, doesn't matter. And they are students sitting there showing me something that they brought from home. Okay, it's like a scene. And I want them to make it up, right? So there's 3 chairs. There's 3 designated chairs. First chair is not, their goal is not to establish a pattern. Their goal is not to, close off, find the final button, find the heightened version of whatever that thing was. Their goal is to do anything, right? If you've read anything about improv, you've probably come across Mick Napier's approach, which is take care of yourself. Get the thing out there. Make yourself look good for the first bit of the scene, and then support everybody. This is the same kind of concept here. Do anything. You get to do whatever you want in this scenario, right? So people will bring in, for example, and this isn't going to be a fun example because it's hard to just come up with really funny ones right at the top of your head, unless you do improv like me. No, this is going to be very boring. So say chair 1 says, look, I brought a pencil from home. What is chair 2? Chair 2 is almost the most important person in this scenario, okay? They're not necessarily defining the pattern, but they are finding something that can be repeated and heightened to its completion by the third thing, okay? So there's 100 different routes for them to go. First person brought a pencil. How are you going to heighten that? What do you heighten? Is it ordinary? Is it that it's such an ordinary thing that you brought for show and tell? I brought a hairdryer, right? Lame, boring. And then the third person needs to drive that home. But the second person really needs to dig in, think what it is that heightening will culminate on this item or this thing, right? And it's their job to bring it to the next place. So, for example, I brought a plume and ink, right? It's a writing utensil, but we have also established a pattern that it is becoming more antiquated writing utensils, yeah? So what is the third person's goal? The third person's goal is to bring that home, right? Solidify what the pattern is. So it might take them a while, it might give them pause, but they need to really think of it in terms of what the second person presented them, right? In context of the first thing. So a feather or a plume, an ink, tablet, stone tablet, and chisel. Boom. It's done. It's not a funny thing, but you can see the heightening. It wasn't just that it was a writing utensil. They were heightening more things than that. And you have to be able to pick up on that. I mean, that to me is game of the scene. I describe it in its simplest terms as big, bigger, biggest. It's blank, blanker, blankest. Blank, blanker, blankest. And then you can turn it into love. You can make it abstract ideas. You can do all this stuff. But from that foundation is where you want to grow from. Think of it simply. We're simple people. Let's act like it. Well, that's been an episode of No More Bits. I hope that exercise is helpful if you are pondering game of the scene and your group is out there and you're wondering, how do we attack this? I don't know. That to me is a pivotal exercise, and it's boring as hell because game as a concept, boring as hell, right? It's funny that it's the thematic thing about the scene that makes it good, and it can be so boring to get through. So just stick with it and make sure you're driving home. It doesn't matter, man. You can heighten it however you want. If someone said pencil, pen, and an Apple pencil, that is heightening. That is heightening. Is that the best heightening they can do? That's so subjective. Next scene, you know what I mean? Keep moving forward with this, right? And by a certain point, you will be doing this so quickly that it will be inherent in your bones. And I also wanted to reiterate, the third person in this scenario, their options should be fewer than the second person's. And the second person's options should be fewer than the first person's, right? We're literally approaching this in the third thought aspect, which we're not talking about now. We're talking about game of the scene. But think about how you're heightening as you go, because that's where good scenes and bad scenes differ. Was that the best choice that you could have made with the information you had, right? Never know. But anyway, hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. Bye. The show you've just listened to is a part of the Podfix Network. To listen to other shows on the network, head over to podfixnetwork.com. Follow on Twitter @Podfix, and join the Podfix Nation at facebook.com/Podfix.